Hi, everybody. I'm Payton Nyquvest, Chair, CEO, and co-founder of Numinus. Thanks, everybody who's online for joining us, and really wanted to thank the Microdose folks very, very much for having us today. So Numinus was founded about 2.5 years ago, and really at the time, primarily there was most of the work that was being done in the space was not-for-profit work. Compass was really sort of the only corporate interest in the space, and at Numinus, really the mission from the very beginning has been addressing the universal desire to heal and be well. And through a lot of conversations with a lot of the leading research organizations, including the British Columbia Centre on Substance Use, MAPS, USONA, really trying to see how we could help bridge the gap between research and practice and start to develop what we believe would be the necessary infrastructure to be able to help make that transition and provide the infrastructure that psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy could pour into. And that's really led to the Numinus ecosystem that you see mentioned here, Numinus Bioscience, which is our Health Canada licensed lab and production facility, Numinus R&D, which is where we do all of our protocol and clinic SOP development, led by a very, very strong medical leadership team, which Dr. Evan Wood will speak more on later. And then Numinus Health, which is our clinic platform, both virtual and physical in person, to develop the infrastructure around providing psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. I don't really have to get too much into the why, obviously, in terms of the importance of this category and really what psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy could potentially mean for this category. One of the stats that really always stands out to me is 1 in 2 Canadians will be affected by a mental health issue by the time they're 40. And probably one of the most alarming things is the fact that a lot of these numbers continue to go up. Whether it's addiction, suicide, depression, anxiety, obviously in light of what's going on with COVID and the environment we're in right now as well, we're not doing a good job of addressing these numbers, and treatments like psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy could be a huge help in addressing a lot of these huge issues that we continue to deal with today. So going back to the Numinus ecosystem, the idea around this ecosystem is with the ultimate goal of providing safe, evidence-based, accessible psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And to get into that in a little bit more detail, Numinus Bioscience, as I mentioned, is a Health Canada licensed lab and production facility currently generating revenue and licensed by Health Canada to test, possess, and distribute a number of different psychedelics, including MDMA, psilocybin, psilocin, mescaline, and DMT. And most recently, Health Canada has amended that license to include the extraction, cultivation, and extraction from the naturally occurring mushrooms, extracting psilocybin from the mushrooms themselves. A lot of the research that's been done to date around psilocybin has been on synthetic psilocybin, and for us to be able to start to look at a natural psilocybin source presents a lot of opportunities to us, not only on just being able to provide a natural source for psilocybin, but also looking at whether it's cost reductions and continuing to move towards that goal of accessibility for people. And very, very proud to announce that we've just recently actually completed our first cultivation and harvest of psilocybin mushrooms, which from what we can tell is one of, if not maybe the first psilocybin mushrooms to be grown legally in North America since the 1970s. Numinus R&D, which Dr. Evan Wood will expand on more so later in this presentation, is really our medical research unit developing therapies and partnering with a number of different research and regulatory groups to not only drive policy, but to continue to work towards being able to move this category from research and into practice. Two big initiatives that we announced in our most recent prospectus filing are some compassionate access protocols, one with MDMA and one with psilocybin, that we intend on getting off of the ground towards the end of this year and early into next year. And finally, Numinus Health, which is where we hold our virtual and in-person clinic model and platform. We have a clinic in Vancouver that is up and operating, that has been used as a bit of a blueprint and a platform to start developing what that expanded clinic model will look like, both looking at opportunities in Canada as well as the US and abroad. So turning to the landscape, and again, most of you are all aware of this. And for us, what's been really, really interesting and exciting is, when we started Numinus 2.5 years ago, to see the huge amount of momentum and progress that's been made, not only on the investment side, but more importantly on the regulatory side, has really been continued to be extremely encouraging. The FDA granting breakthrough therapy status for MDMA for PTSD, psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression and mood disorders, is just continues to point to the real groundswell and tide turning that you're seeing from the FDA, and then obviously from the investment community. Seeing Compass go public with a $1 billion+ market cap, and other groups in the space continuing to see success on fundraising, just continues to point the direction that we see this category going. And then really recently seeing Health Canada grant Section 56 licenses for people looking to use psilocybin for end-of-life anxiety. And then obviously looking really just immediately around the corner, the ballots in the U.S. for psilocybin for psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy in Oregon, as well as the ballot for Washington, could mean huge macro indications that we'll see towards the beginning of next week. So just quickly touching on the progress that we've made over the last year or so, really as Numinus became really formed and up and off of the ground, acquiring a clinic and merging with the lab company to form Numinus as it is today. We've raised a total through 2 rounds of about just over $11 million, $6.8 million pre-listing, and then another $4.6 million in a subscription prospectus financing that we closed in the beginning of September, listing on the TSX, and then really all of the great work that the lab has done around cultivation and growing of psilocybin, and then looking towards the future, as I mentioned, really implementing the compassionate access protocols. So going towards the team, and really of all the work that we've done, the thing that we're most excited about and grateful for is the amazing group of people that we've pulled in and put together at Numinus. Really, in developing this new industry, pulling expertise from a number of different industries, as well as really leaning on some of the great people that have been really instrumental in getting psychedelics to where they are today. So the team, as I mentioned myself, co-founder, CEO, and chair of Numinus, and really, more than first and foremost, I come to the space as a patient first. Psychedelic assisted psychotherapy had saved my life and really opened my eyes to what might be possible around this category. Professionally, I have a 50+ year background in Canadian capital markets, and really was involved with cannabis back in the very beginning, and watched the interesting trajectory that cannabis has been on, and was very privy to not only the financing efforts, but also the regulatory efforts that went on around cannabis as well. Stacey Wallen, who's my co-founder, director, was formerly the director of venture programming at the BC Tech Association and has a lot of experience with tech startup. I'll let Dr. Evan Wood introduce himself later on in the presentation, but I'll just state that extremely grateful to have Dr. Evan Wood on board with us at Numinus as our Chief Medical Officer. Michael Tan, our COO, most recently was the founding director of the BC Liquor Distribution branch for cannabis division and was in charge of setting up the recreational province-wide model for cannabis in British Columbia. John Fong, our CFO, who has lots of experience in Canadian capital markets, most recently taking a company from startup to 100 million in net income. And then Dana Harvey, our Chief Comms Officer, with 25 plus years of experience in startups in many different industries and has been instrumental in helping us get our messaging right and out there and heard. And then quickly going through the advisors, as I mentioned, pulling on expertise of individuals who have been involved in this space for many years. Dennis McKenna and Dr. Gabor Mate have been household and staple names around this industry for a very long time, and we're very grateful to have them on board, and then really leaning on not only clinical advice but general advice on how we move this category forward, with folks like Jamie Wheel and Ben Nempton, who have very strong voices in not only in the psychedelic community but in the mental health community in general. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Evan Wood.
Thanks, Payton. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was getting I think I was just mic'd on mute while you were speaking. So yeah, thanks to everybody for your interest and for the organizers for inviting us to speak. Yeah, Payton sort of suggested to introduce myself a little bit. So for people that are interested in our company, I bring a background of a number of initiatives from sort of idea through research in the clinic to real world implementation. In my early days, I was involved in the evaluation and development of strategies to prevent and treat HIV infection. And the treatment as prevention strategy we pioneered in British Columbia has become the global international standard now, and work that we did is well represented in international therapeutic guidelines. As part of that work, because it was in the substance use space, required novel strategies for engaging people who had acquired HIV through using drugs like heroin. And so programs that have become the standard of care in Canada, like heroin prescription or supervised injecting facilities, went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada and became national standards of care here. So I've been involved in taking things out of the clinic and through the entire policymaking process. Fortunately, I don't think we'll face the same kind of political headwinds as we did with things like cannabis, but I'll share also that I was involved in founding a little organization called Stop the Violence BC that ultimately was involved in getting the legalization of cannabis on the on Justin Trudeau's party platform prior to the legalization in Canada. Most recently, I've been a professor of medicine, a Canada Research Chair at the University of British Columbia, and executive director of the BC Centre on Substance Use, which is a staff of about 200 people and a collective research budget of over $10 million that did a number of internationally and nationally recognized initiatives, including writing guidelines for the treatment of different substance use disorders. So that pathway from the laboratory to real world implementation is something that I'm really passionate about, and obviously bringing about change in people's lives.